And I thought I was going to make a ton of money. That was
And here
totally,
we are.
yeah. And here we are, fucking making podcasts in my basement.
Hey, listen, it's the best motherfucking podcast out there.
I carry on like I carry my pack, even if I don't come back.
Welcome back, Warriors. We're here today on National Donut Day, my favorite day of the year. As you can tell, I have my donut Vans on. Anyway, we're back today with a very special guest. We are here with Kevin Potts. He's an entrepreneur, an artist. Some say a DJ. I'm not quite sure. He is also the CMO and the co-founder of Dynamic Warriors. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you so much. And yes, I was a DJ.
You were?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure when it was your profession, it was much different than being in a basement during quarantine.
Yeah, it was for sure. I used to love to produce music and stuff. I was back in the day in Burning Man, and I used to go everywhere. I used to DJ for 10 years in Los Angeles. It was a good pastime. It definitely just goes along the artist side of whatever I do, because it's always the creative behind DW and everything. So, we need some original music played. Fine, we'll just make it. Don't pay someone to make it and everything. So, it's definitely one of those things that I love being creative. So, it's
Nice.
one of those things.
Nice. So was that before, after, or during your time in the Marine Corps? When did you start doing the DJ thing?
Oh yeah, no, that was much later. After we got out of the Marine Corps, we did executive production for James Cameron I did it for 6 years in LA, and that's kind of, when you're in that creative element in Venice Beach, you pick some things up,
Right.
You pick some things up, going to the beach, DJing, going back to the beach, and then drinking, beach DJ. So it just ends up being part of your life. And then I went to film school. So what I originally wanted to go to school for was music, but that was actually a science degree.
Okay.
And I was way too stupid for that. So they're like, yeah,
Right.
we're going to send you to film, just like they sent me to the infantry and the Marine Corps and said, yeah, that's where you belong. So fair enough. And I loved it. I love film, and I love editing and everything. And we usually have to buy royalties for music and everything. And I'm like, well, why don't we just make our own? You made friends with a bunch of sound engineers in school, and you just learn to do things on your own. And so it's actually really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I tease you, but we love watching
Thanks.
your lives when we're all in the pandemic on a Friday night with nothing more to do. But in that Marine Corps talk, you mentioned we. I'm assuming I know that you're referring to Derek Porter. So tell me
Yeah.
a bit about your guys' dynamic and
About our dynamic selves.
about you.
Got Derek and I will be friends for 20 years this year, right? And that's awesome. Not just friends, but brothers. And we met in the Marine Corps, met right outside of boot camp, served combat together, worked in executive protection for James Cameron together. We always kind of separate a little bit. He went to school, I went to school for different things, and then we just kind of always come back to each other. And then he moved back to Colorado. I was still in LA, but we opened up a business together. Then I came to Colorado. So it was just one of those things where we've just always been together, and it's always been great. You know what I mean? So definitely my brother for sure, closer than anyone I have.
That's super cool. Oh,
Yeah.
he's over here crying
So, yeah.
in the West
Yeah.
Wing.
Yeah, in the West Wing.
Yeah. So you talk about you keep mentioning protecting James Cameron, and to me that's so awesome. Like famous people, because I'm one of the normal people that didn't get to experience that. Tell me a little bit about what you did in protecting famous people. What is that like?
Everyone thinks that's exciting. It's not. If it would have been Tom Cruise or something, where everyone wants an autograph and wants to or Justin Bieber or something, I'm sure there's some. Yeah, I know. I'm sure there's someone who wants to kill him, but then when they see the director, they're like, "Who the fuck is that?"
Right,
you know what I
right,
mean?
yeah.
There's it's so minimal of times where someone actually came up and said "Hey," and it obviously was a huge fan. Someone did that in Bali. Bali, Indonesia, out of all places, they go up there to him and hey, I love your movies. That was it. And I'm like,
Right.
so the most of the time, I mean, he's total workaholic, so he's doing his own thing. It's mostly just protecting the kids from ransoms and making sure they're not kidnapped and stuff like that. So most of the time, you're really just like hanging out with the damn nannies. I mean,
Right.
So
and
ransom today? No, we're good.
yeah, we're good.
Right.
So that's really about it. I mean, there's exciting times there. You travel, you get to do some cool things. I think we were very fortunate to be given a silver platter out of the Marine Corps. Most people, I mean, at the end of the day, we're homeless. You know,
Right.
you're like, hey, thanks for serving combat. Fuck you, and then that's it. You're on your own.
Right.
And that's really kind of the problem with the Marine Corps is people usually go back to what they're used to. And I was lucky. My friend from Ventura called me, and he's like, I was stacking lumber in -5 degree weather with my father, which is great because that was like the last 6 months got to work with him before he died. And then they're like, hey, you want to move next door to Britney Spears and work in Malibu? And I was like, see ya. And
Right.
I was gone 2 days later, packed up all my shit in my truck, drove down there, and then I never moved back home since. I haven't been home since 17, since the Marine Corps, but you know what I mean?
That's
You
a
go
cool
home and you're
opportunity.
trying to figure your life out.
Right.
Yeah.
And at what age, right? Because you're still.
I was 21, so I
fresh.
went in at 17, got out at 21. So
That's crazy.
not knowing what the hell to do. You have an infantry, rifleman, combat, killer. There's zero work for you except if you want to be a cop. That was definitely not in my cards. No offense against cops. Not my thing.
Right.
And what are you going to do? You know? So I was lucky to get an executive protection job, and I worked there until Obama gave us the post 9/11 GI Bill and said, hey, you can go to college for free now. And then I got a degree, and I thought I was going to make a ton of money. That was
And here
totally
we are.
Yeah, and here we are, fucking making podcasts in my basement.
Hey, listen, it's the best motherfucking podcast out there.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so in that, you mentioned your father, and that being the last 6 months
Mm.
that you were able to spend some time with him. I'm assuming at that he passed. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. My dad got cancer, so he was a smoker since he was like 14. Died of Bud Light and stuff like that. So definitely one of the quintessential like old school just dudes who just smoked all the time. And then finally he got cancer, and he got it in his bladder first, and they actually replaced his bladder. So they actually took it out, took all the cancer out, and then replaced it with a new one. I'm like, the dude could like still like fuck and piss normal.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, you've been given a second chance. And he just continued to do the same thing. And then pretty soon hit his lymph nodes. This is like 3 years later. Finally he ended up passing away in 2009. So it was tough. My dad and I were really close. And I mean, fuck. I mean, that's really about all she wrote. So I just feel like it's already been like a lifetime, but it feels like yesterday at the same time. So it's a bummer. I miss him totally, especially when I went back home. I just got back from 30 days being in Idaho with my parents and stuff, and my mom still lives in the same house.
Right.
But man, just being there, you're just like, you used to smoke in the bathroom here
All the
and like do
memories.
this stuff, and it really is. It was really a little surreal, just being there. But my wife and I went through probably about 4 decades of photos, from their wedding and stuff like that. And I was like, what are these pictures? Thousands of pictures, just drinking and going through photos. And it was so much fun, to learn and get new stories and stuff. So I'm really trying to connect with my family, I think, this year.
That's really great.
Yeah.
So you say all this happened. Obviously, you were young when this happened, right? Because you said you got out at 21. It was very
Yeah.
short time until your father passed. And I know, as being a cancer survivor, how much that can affect you mentally. It being
yeah.
the person going through it, but not only the people that have to deal with it, our family members and things like that. So tell me a little bit about how that affected you mentally. And obviously with the Marine Corps, we know that there's PTSD and there's all these things that soldiers go through. So going through that and losing your father within a short time.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like this was a really shitty part about my dad dying. So I was 26 years old. And, you know, it's like I was straight combat veteran, you know, straight out of Iraq, like, you know, just hardened.
Right.
And there was nothing, you know, when we had the funeral and everything like that, I didn't cry or anything. And my sister was super mad. She's like, why aren't you fucking crying?
Right.
And I'm like, you know, even my dad's brother was there. He's got two brothers and a sister. And, you know, he was crying and stuff. And I'm like, I just felt like I had to be that strong person because it's like I always have to be that strong person for the family.
Mm-hmm.
And I have like, I don't know, I have some, I don't know, like an ode to my family. Like I have to be there, the strong one for them because they're falling apart, you know, which probably affected me more because I was really closer to my father, I think, than my brother and my sister.
Mm-hmm.
Even they're 8 years older than me, so I was like the youngest.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I kind of get that card a little bit. I understood him, you know, so I think there's, you know, a lot there. But fuck, I don't even know if I ever really processed it all that much. You know, it's kind of tough, you know. Yeah, the PTSD and the combat, like, definitely, it makes you have no feeling.
Teach you to block things out. I mean,
oh yeah, big time.
I mean, I can
Yeah.
associate with what you're saying with being. I feel like I'm the same way. I'm the youngest. I only have one sibling. I have a sister,
Yeah.
but I've heard over and over from not just my, you know, my parents and my sister, but it's like we knew if anybody was going to get cancer and beat it, it was going to be you because you're kind of like the thing, you know,
Right,
the tie
right.
that holds everything together. And
Sure.
it's like, okay, so when do you get that part where there's not this mental block of when do I deal with this and how do I deal with this? And I can't imagine having gone through combat and having that mental block because you have to shut that out, right?
You disassociate is what you do, and basically you just refuse to accept what's happening, you know. And I actually physically watched my father take his last breath, which is probably the hardest thing I had to do, you know, because they took him out of hospice and just put him at home for like the remaining 48 hours or whatever. And that sucked. I mean, that was like probably the hardest thing, but it's at the end of the day, it's just like hold your shit together because that's what Marines do. You know what I mean? And like, there's no room for weakness. And it's so stupid because, like, of course you can be weak at that moment, but when it's ingrained in you
You're
like
trained.
that, you're just like, you know what? Nope, it ain't affecting me. And then you just walk around like it doesn't, and then it just comes out later.
So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the fact that you've been trained to completely kind of shut off emotionally, right? You've been trained to shut that off, and now here you are as 10 years, 12 years down the road, you're dealing, I don't know how old you are, my bad.
It's
But
okay.
you're
So it's 2005, so it's 15 years.
Okay, so you're 15 years down the road. You've mentally blocked out combat. You've blocked out your father's death, somebody that you were super close to. You've dealt with being, you know, kind of the lifeline of the family. At your age now, how do you deal with that mentally to not have it come back and affect you?
Oh, 15 years of therapy. Like, no shit. Like, you know, as soon as I moved here, you know, I started going to the VA, started going to more hardcore therapy, prolonged exposure. It's probably one of the most difficult therapies you have to go to, and I went to that for a year. I mean, it's just like, I don't think you ever stop. I'm one of those anti-pill people. No, I'm not about like drugs at all, which is why I take CBD and stuff like that. Anything that's like holistic, but anything that's like narcotics or anything like that, I don't take. I don't like it. I mean, unless I'm like schizophrenic or something, I guess I
Right.
could get it. But maybe if I'm schizophrenic, I wouldn't know. But I'm all against that. So, you know, just therapy, constantly improving yourself, and then outside of therapy, life coaching, reading books. I mean, constantly bettering yourself. I mean, it's just, you know, our marriage and stuff like that is a constant work. Everything, if you don't work at it, man, it's just going to deteriorate. I could block out shit all day if I want, but at the end of the day, nothing ever gets solved. So I think the hardest part is actually learning to be like a human again,
Right.
not a robot.
Right, because that's what is ingrained in us, right?
Right.
So you talked a little bit about life coaching. Tina McVeigh, she was on our show.
Yeah, Tammy.
She's a life coach. Tammy, we
Yeah.
love you. Shout out to her. So
Right
that's
on.
great. You also talked about CBD. So I too, being a cancer survivor, have struggled a little bit with. I don't know how to pinpoint whether it's a depression or whether it's just the coping mechanism, but I too am completely against a narcotic. I actually broke down to my oncologist crying and saying, please don't put me on medication. Please figure out another way. So can you tell me a little bit about the benefits of the Dynamic Warriors CBD oils? And
I think one of the biggest things for me is taking it for anxiety. Before I would try and do like I would take muscle relaxers if I had to. I hate anything that impairs my ability other than alcohol. Like anything that makes me feel loopy, like I'm drugged. Getting high, I hate getting high. I hate smoking weed.
oh my gosh, me too.
Okay, I super
I
panic
get
attack.
crazy. I'm like the most paranoid person you've ever
I'm
met in
like,
your life.
what's going on? Yeah,
And everybody's like, what do you mean? This is like an indica or a sativa or whatever the fuck they're
Whatever
talking
it
about.
is.
I don't even know, but both of them make me a lunatic, and I cannot keep my shit together.
I've done them all. I've done them all growing up, but now it's not anymore like swag anymore. It's like some 20 times more potent fucking surgical marijuana. I'm like, I can't do it.
Right, have one bite of this Tootsie Roll and you'll be on cloud nine for 4 days. Right?
It really is. Yeah, I'll be thrown up over someone's balcony. I'm like, they're trying to drug me with Gatorade. Yeah, no, they're trying to help you.
Right,
That's pretty much what it's like for me. So, so the CBD thing, just the fact that it doesn't get you high, and I still get like the benefits from it. I just really like, especially when I'm going to bed. There are so many times where things affect me very easily. An opening an email at like when I'm in bed could be possibly the worst thing for me to do. I have chronic nightmares nightly, every night. That's just part of my shit.
Right.
So, when, I'm sitting there, sorry, you just confused me over there.
No, you're fine. You're
when
fine.
I'm, you have chronic nightmares, and then when I'm sitting there and I open up an email and I sit there and I'm like, start like thinking about it, I'll like just wake up in like full panic. Like just kind of like right when I'm about to like drift off, I'll just go like, wake up, and then my wife's got to deal with all that. She's like, what is it? I'm like, nothing.
Right. So I'm super intrigued by
Yeah.
this, but chronic nightmares, like,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit more about
Sure.
that? I know this is crazy. I might be a sadist. I like to know and get the feel for what people experience. Like,
Oh, I mean,
I have nightmares, but it's like,
Yeah.
I was buried alive. Like,
Yeah,
it's nothing probably like what you experienced because of your
no,
history.
like full on, waking up like screaming type of choking my wife or something like that. Like pretty crazy.
Not in a good way.
Not in a good way. I think Derek's dealt with those since Iraq. So every time I stay at his house, he'll be like, like this. He's like, yeah, I heard you last night. And I'll just basically wake up completely just like what happened. The only way I'll know that if I had nightmares is if I'm really tired. I'll wake up and I'll just be like, oh, yeah,
I
it
was
wasn't
up
a
all
good
night.
night. Yeah, for sure. That's really about it. They usually are my storytellers, and then I got to hear it all the next morning. So-
That's pretty, that takes a pretty incredible person. Your wife is incredible, Julia. We love her. But that's a lot.
it
That's a
is.
lot to, I've never experienced it, but I can't imagine. My aunt would always tell me as a kid, my uncle would always kind of act crazy. He was in Vietnam, and there would be certain times where he would drink and he would get crazy, and I would hear these stories about he would go out in their fields and think that the horses were, he was back in combat, and he would pull out his guns and he would shoot at their own animals. And I can't even imagine what it's like for you alone to have to deal with this every day, but also for our veteran wives that help us and you get through every day, right? Because
Yeah,
this is
for
hard
sure.
for them as well.
For sure, yeah. So this it really helps me like sleep for the most part. Just take off the edge. I think it really helps with that stuff. If it's always a stress-induced thing, if I'm really stressed out, which I'm an entrepreneur, so it's like stress is my life, anyways.
Right.
You never know what tomorrow's going to bring, type of thing. And if it's just really tough, like the pandemic hit, and I was like, fuck, like everything came into this little pot, and I'm like, this sucks, and everyone's is suffering, and then it just turned into mayhem. And then that's when my stuff really, really starts to peak, and then I start to go, we'll sleep in separate beds. I mean, just because for safety, I guess, and just so we can actually get a night's sleep, because if I don't sleep, she don't sleep, so.
It's crazy how the pandemic has played differently in different people's lives and marriages and small businesses. And it's good that you guys have found this happy medium to keep you guys sane.
Yeah.
Because
yeah. I mean, we work together, live together, sleep together. So, I mean, we're together all the time. So the pandemic is just like, oh, you want to go to lunch? Too bad. Now you're really together. And I'm like, holy shit.
You're actually
need to
lucky.
Take a trip.
You're lucky she hasn't choked your ass out in the middle of the night. Listen, it's coming.
I am.
I can feel
know.
it.
I can totally feel it. I know. She's going to stab me.
I can feel it. Well, Kevin, it's been awesome meeting with you today. I know that you have just started this foundation, which you think is probably something that is in your heart and just ordinary to you, but we think that you are incredibly dynamic, and we thank you for everything that you've done. And with this...
Thank you. Do I get a bracelet of my own company?
You get a bracelet to your own company.
Thanks,
Thank you so
guys.
much. Thanks for being here. This
Thanks,
was awesome.
Mindy.
Thanks.
I'm glad. Thank you.